Welcome back. This is Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. This morning, we are focusing on the impact of the heavy rains on the country's food security and the solutions needed to get out of the current crisis as we discuss both extremes when it comes to raining and also during the drought period. With me in studio, Dr. James Nyoro is food security expert and former governor of the county of Kiambu. Dr. John Mutunga is the lawmaker representing Tigania West constituency and also chairs the National Assembly's Agriculture Committee. And we also joined this morning by Mankai Sanko, the Deputy Country Director of World Food Program here in Kenya. Gentlemen, your time is all appreciated. Dr. Nyoro, coming to you. Talking about the fundamental aspects of the 6 key dimensions of food security aspect, which is on accessibility, availability, and stability, the 3 factors as we head to the rest. I mean, in terms of accessibility, are we seeing a crisis further compounded because of the current situation of already a majority of Kenyans who are unable to put food on their table? And how impactful is this on the health of the population going forward?
That's a very important question asking at a stage like now, where many regions are particularly looking at top dressing, because you cannot plant right now. You can only top dress. And Honorable John Mutunga was talking about how the soils are reached and whatever. I think in the essence of food security, as you have really defined, you look like a food security expert. The most important one is availability. Food must be available. Now, availability is what we are talking about, the production. It is either you produce it, or if you are producing higher value crops or you are in vulnerable areas, you get it from elsewhere. We know that, obviously, this country, and it's something, when we talk about the global hunger index, we are talking about our inability to produce enough maize, importing, give and take about 30% on a normal, ordinary year, except last year. Bringing in 80% of our rice, bringing in 80% of our wheat from outside, bringing in 50% of our sugar, spending close to half a billion shillings, 500 billion shillings to import food that otherwise would have been produced here. So one of the factors of food security is availability. Now, right now, we are talking about the effect on that availability. We've talked about over 40% estimated loss, all other things being equal. Our neighbors will suffer the same, but they're in a different situation. So we can say that generally availability is going to be adversely affected. Now we see the war in Ukraine and it's getting worse. So even getting grains from outside, and you can remember very well, even in June, July, when we were trying to get grains from outside the country, and we could not. I mean, people went to all over the world looking for maize, and they couldn't. When you come to the second aspect, which is access. Now, access has many aspects. One of it is that our food systems do not seem to work. Because what you see is that there is excess food in one region, and there is deficit. There is supply on one region and demand on the other, but the supply and demand do not meet. Now, with the rains that we have experienced now, there has been a breakdown in infrastructure. I mean, 2 days ago, you saw the road between Galsen and Ramu was inaccessible. So even if you have all the fish in the world, and you are in Ramu and you want to take it to Galsen, you can't. Now, we have the fixing of the infrastructure, which is going to take a colossal amount of money, will influence whether food is going to move from the surplus region to the deficit region, assuming that that food is available. When it comes to affordability, that has different components. One of it is that the arsile areas. And what I think we need, and I probably will come to talking about climate change and whatever. The prediction I'm hearing, and Dr. Ali here can confirm, the prediction I'm hearing is that the southern part of Africa, that is, if you look at parts of Namibia, Botswana, and even South Africa itself, is already experiencing a La Nina, more than a dry season. And if that moves up, It means that we'll come from El Nino to La Nina. So by the time we fix the infrastructure, by the time we fix, now that aspect of affordability, affordability, you have to have money. And the irony of this country is that if you look at the madness that have come in with new crops, okay? If you look at, a new orange, a new apple that is now being distributed in the whole of Africa called Wabogo Apple, I'm not promoting it, okay? If you look at flowers, we are a very sophisticated country on one hand, but we are also totally subsistent on another hand. And, that's a dichotomy that we need to discuss. So affordability will affect people like people in arid and semi-arid areas who have lost livestock. They lost livestock during the drought. They are losing livestock during the rains, okay? Those people will not have access to disposable income to buy food that presumably will be available through these roads, that presumably will be produced through the circumstances that we have talked about. So it is a very, very, very precarious situation that we are entering into. Okay.
Dr. Mutunga, coming to you. Dr. Nyono paints a picture of how the three key dimensions have been affected, and they seem to have been also adversely impacted by the heavy rains. But it leads and begs this fundamental question then. If we are importing 500 billion worth of food, and yet we can produce that here locally, the fundamental question to you as the chair of the Agriculture Committee and of course an expert in this field is, can Kenya feed itself?
Kenya can feed itself, completely feed itself. It's the policy decisions and choices that we make that determine whether we are able to feed ourselves or not. A case example is last year when we were able to produce enough meat for ourselves. So it is possible. There's a policy decision to import certain foods, which is quite wrong. First of all, the edible oils. We spend more than 170 billion Kenya shillings importing edible oil every year. This is money lost out there, jobs created in another environment when we could have done it here. Over 2 million farmers can produce this oil. So we deny them that opportunity and choose to import. Then the Kenya Kwanza administration has put a decision on this towards reverting that particular policy direction that has been operating for quite some time. On the other hand, we can basically intensify the land that we have, even when we are relying on the rainfall. Make sure that the soil health aspect and the issue of the quality of seed is taken care of and increase on production and productivity. On the other hand, we can open more land. And the government has put in plans to increase the water supply through the mega dam process of putting together more than 100 mega dams, more than 500 earth dams, and so many of the what we call water pans, and closing the water that goes downstream. Most of our water bodies do not need the fresh water from the highlands. So we can contain this water upstream and irrigate downstream to supplement the crops when the rain subsides. So it is possible to actually feed ourselves and export food from Kenya. Kenya can produce most of the ecological benefit we have as a country is such that we can grow most of the crops, from temperate crops to tropical crops. We can basically grow them along the highland, the altitude. Altitude gives us an opportunity to grow almost any crop in this country. So we need to just organize ourselves better, be data-based in terms of our planning, because we need to plan with the reality in perspective. If we are not very clear how much we are producing in a given piece of area of land, then we will just be making wrong estimates. But if we are very, very, very clear that this year we want to produce so many tons of carbohydrate-related food, so many tons of, protein, we can make policy decisions that we can be implemented, and we can produce enough food for our country and even sell a lot.
Okay, talking about the policy aspect, and it begs then the question of where accountability falls, and two critical components that you have mentioned in your earlier submission and the submission that you have made right away. And that points to the fertilizer aspect and also the edible oil, which you said that can be produced here locally. And one of the first major initiatives, since you chair the Agriculture Committee by the Kenya Kwanza administration or the government, was through the Kenya National Trading Corporation to import edible oils from Malaysia, and which ended up with the taxpayer losing billions of shillings. Companies with close connections to people in government were awarded, and the then CS, Moses Kuria, appeared before the Senate where he was hard-pressed on those particular questions. And because of taxation, they ended up pricing the oil more than even what the local manufacturers were here were selling. I mean, when you talk about policy, then it also needs deliberate accountability, is it?
Right, correct.
Therefore, how can we address all these gaps? Because we already have a problem, as made by Dr. Nyoro, of addressing this particular problem. But again, there must be deliberate accountability measures that must be taken, for example, towards the agriculture. They appeared before your committee, and the edible oil scandal. How can this be fixed, given that you are in government and you are a lawmaker representing the Kenyan people?
As a government, we need to be deliberate on what policy direction we take and ensure that implementation is not hindered by anything. And that is possible. It has occurred in this country. We've been able to sort out many problems when a government takes a policy decisions and ensure that it works. When it comes to agricultural products, it is possible for us. We have a policy decision to reduce on the balance of, organize the balance of trade, reduce the imports and by increasing production and productivity. And this can be achieved when the government takes a decision to do it, as it has already taken in terms of edible oil. Already we have a lot of sunflower seeds being distributed across this country for farmers to grow the sunflower seeds and then produce the oil for cooking. And that does not come alone as a benefit to the country. The sunflower waste material or the byproducts of the sunflower seed, the sunflower seed cake, is used for livestock feed constitution. And then on the other hand, we have also distributed quite a large amount of cotton seed. That will give us both the lint, the fiber, and also we will have the cotton seed oil. So there are ways of managing this. It's a matter of taking a decision and making sure it is done. If you look at what Kenya Kwanza government has been doing, if the government needs a tax collected on a certain area, it has happened. So in the same way, in the same vigor, it is possible to ensure production of whatever it is that we need in this country. It's a matter of guiding the farmers and enabling them to realize that they will have market for whatever they produce. I remember some times back we were pushing very hard to have Kenyans produce sim, canola, to produce sunflower and so on, so that you can have enough quantities of edible oil as much and as well as produce sufficient quantities of the cake for the animal feed industry. But this was interfered with somewhere along the line by the pricing regimes, such that when you land the grain on the market, the promised price of that grain is lower than the production cost. So when farmers lose, they don't go back to that taking up such decisions. Okay. So what the government needs to do is safeguard. During our campaigns, we were promising Kenyans guaranteed minimum returns. It is possible for our government to guarantee minimum returns, especially if we focus on the insurance aspect. Crop insurance is one key way of guaranteeing minimum return. Okay. Whether there are catastrophes like we've had floods, or whether there are other interferences, then insurance can come back to cushion the farmers. They will be put into production the following year. So it is possible to actually do it. And so what we need is focus and investment which is targeted and very articulated.
So basically it's wrapping the farmer in immunity or the farmers
precisely.
in immunity. Okay.
Because the farmer is the one who save us from this anger.
And is an important player in this context. So we'll be talking more about the farmer and what needs to be fixed. Coming to you, Mr. Sanko, how much of what's happening at the moment, because in November, I went to cover the floods in the county of Wajir, and some months which preceded November last year was experiencing severe drought. A majority of the population, more than 85%, on the brink of starvation. And then November, because of the floods, the county was cut off. You wouldn't access Wajir County except by air. And the amount of aid that would come or assistance from Wajir Airport must have been airlifted to other parts of the county, which is again another whole sort of challenges in terms of logistics. And now it's the aspect of this being a Kenyan phenomena. How much of this is a connection between what we're experiencing and climate change?
Well, just like what I said earlier, and my colleagues here have clearly mentioned that disasters are bound to occur, unfortunately, the world that we live in. But it's how we bounce back that is very, very, really important. I mean, you clearly mentioned that, Garissa, a year ago, we were talking about these communities facing the longest drought. 6 months ago, we've got the El Nino flood, and now we got back into this flood. So in terms of the supply routes, these continue to really affect the food security in these areas. Yeah. When you look at the movement of commodities, goods and services within, air operations are very expensive. Mm-hmm. So the only way we can ensure that households can actually have their own food is to ensure that the infrastructure that supports agriculture are in place. Example, roads. Roads are very, very important. Yes. They open up the markets. If a farmer grows their own crops and they can't take it to the market, it's a big disaster for them. It really impacts their own households. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you look at post-harvest, because when you talk about logistics, it's all about post-harvest. How do you ensure that when a farmer grows their own crops, especially smallholder farmers, they can ensure that the quality of their goods are taken to the market the way they are, to ensure that they are able to reap back the investment they've put into it. Mm-hmm. When you look at women, who basically in Kenya, I think they take about 60 to 70% of investment in agriculture in this country. You look at the youths, who are basically trying as much as possible to actually make a change in this country. So with a bit of investment in women, some level of investment in the youth, I think will bring a big change in the food security in this country. But at the same time, we, as the World Food Programme, working together with the government, not forgetting the importance of the private sector, what the private sector brings into this. It is very, very important for us not to forget about the private sector when we're looking at these issues of food security in this country. The private sector can be a game changer, but it requires, just like what Doctor said, how do we ensure that the policies that we have, how do we ensure that the governance in place provide that atmosphere, the favorable environment for them to be able to operate, for this country to be a game changer. Okay. But I can say that Kenya can feed itself in this country. Okay.
Dr. Anyolo, you have a point? Please proceed.
I don't want to disagree with my friends, but we've been too good not sometimes to say the situation as it is. I do agree that Kenya can feed, but can is can. Mm-hmm. If you look at, and John has been working with me for many years before we became what we are today. If you look at this country, fundamentally, it can only have a Marshall Plan in order to be able to feed itself. Because the circumstances that we are facing currently are not favoring us. First and foremost, and John mentioned, if you look at maize alone, our per capita consumption is 1 bag, which means every Kenyan consumes 1 bag per year. Now, the population growth is 1 million kids every year, about 2.4%. Mm-hmm. So whereas we had a bad situation where we had a huge gap in supply and demand, that gap is increasing as we don't do anything in terms of increasing food. So that circumstance of the fact that we are increasingly going to have more and more mouths to feed is a thing that we need to consider. And that's why I'm saying we need a Marshall Plan. We need agricultural transformation like never before. And I'm not blaming the current government. This is something that has started from the 70s. So subsequent governments have totally ignored agriculture. And that's why I say I think we are being too good in approaching this subject. I think we should lay everything bare and say what we need to do. And I have said what we need to do is a Marshall Plan, where within that Marshall Plan, we are going to look at key components. What have other countries done in order to move from food insecurity to food security? Ethiopia, for instance. I had the privilege, when I was working for an international organization, of being in charge of Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Rwanda. And if you look at 1984, when the world sang, "We Are the World," Ethiopia was going through a big famine like never before. And when President Meles came in, he did a huge agricultural transformation, and he created an organization that brought everybody together. And today, we have been getting beans through Marsabit from Ethiopia. If you look at other countries, I'm not going into that. So it will need a Marshall Plan. It will need a very, very clear, well-articulated plan of how it is going to be implemented. Now, we come to the question that you raised, and I don't want to go to the political side, on imports. The problem is that food has been made the vehicle for making certain people rich, what you call cartel. And again, this did not start with this government. Every subsequent government has used either fertilizer imports or food maize imports or oil imports or sugar imports. They have made food a vehicle for enriching themselves. I think as a government, we have to be very categorical and say we cannot use a commodity like food to make certain people richer or whatever. There has to be a very deliberate move of what we import, at what price do we import it, what is the running price here. If it is not running at a price lower than it is being produced here, then why are you bringing it? Okay? All that needs to be articulated and a decision made on what we need to import and where. And, Dr. Songok, brings in the aspect of the private sector. In all of this, we have to be able to work with the private sector, because again, where this has happened, and AGRA, Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa, will tell you some of the countries like Mozambique, which, and unfortunately the climate change is devastating the country, they came from food insecurity to food security through involvement of the private sector. Look at the fertilizer distribution we are talking about and the subsidy program that the government is doing. And the government has done a fantastic job to do a census of farmers, which is something that we tried many years, John. And we were unable to do it. But today, they have, registered farmers. They also have introduced this voucher system, which is something that we talked about even during when Akina Disina, who is the current president of the African Development Bank, was working here for AGRA. We were trying to introduce the vouchers. So how about if we now decide NCPB will distribute fertilizers in areas which are far wrong and whatever, but let's engage the private sector, agro dealers, so that they can redeem this voucher, so that you are, increasing the vibrancy of the private sector. The same with buying. So what I'm saying is, let us not be too good here in trying to say what we can. It is difficult. It's going to be difficult. Okay. And it will require a Marshall Plan. And it will require us fixing things that traditionally we have not been able to fix.
Difficult, but is it achievable?
It is achievable, but the goodwill, the political goodwill, first you have to have the plan, which is I'm calling the Marshall Plan, and the transformation strategy. The second thing is that you have to have money. This country has not put money in agriculture. I can tell you that for sure.
That's true.
The amount of the budget that goes to the Minister of Agriculture currently, the amount of money that the counties are putting in agriculture is minimal. Okay. Way below even what you call the Maputo Declaration. We have to put in money. So Marshall Plan, money, then we can come in and do the implementation. Okay. We will get there.
And the three aspects all together. Yes, Dr. Please proceed.
Yeah, I just wanted to prove that it is possible to feed ourselves. Let's look at one example of sugar. Kenya last year Part 1 was able to produce close to 800,000 metric tons of sugar.
Which is what we need.
We need 1.14 million.
1.1 million.
1.4, yeah.
Now, looking at the Kenya Research Foundation, Kenya Research Foundation Institute, because they were all merged together through the formation of CARO, they were all put together. Now we don't call it Research Foundation, it's now Kenya Research Institute. Kenya Research Institute adds 27 varieties which have never landed on the farm. These varieties, some of them have up to 8 months of maturity. And they have better yielding capacity, sucrose yield, than most of the varieties that are in market right now. So the varieties that we are growing take 22 to 24 months to harvest. We have a variety here which can be harvested in 9 months, which means we can harvest twice every year this variety and then feed ourselves. I mean, get enough sugar. That's one single variety, single crop. So when you say the value chain approach should be exhaustive and it should be detailed. We must go and ask ourselves, what are we producing? 800,000 metric tons of sugar. How much do we need to increase this production? So we calculate that and then turn it around and say, what do we need to get 20% increase or 30% increase in the amount of sugar we are producing? It doesn't have to be opening more land. Picking these varieties and landing them on the farm and giving the farmers inputs, or rather supporting the farmers to get the right inputs, planting on time, solves the problem. Yeah. So we are not strategic and categorical in what we do. We allow things to go just... Devolution was supposed to cost this 100%. It was supposed to do... And the function of agriculture is devolved. When you take the function of agriculture to the counties, and the counties leave the function of agriculture and start looking for other ways of surviving, I think we make the mistake.
Okay, and isn't it then also a mistake, I'll come to you, Mr. Sanko, Dr. Mutunga, because Dr. Nyoro raised the aspect of the achievability of this. There's the available land, there's the manpower because of Kenya's young population, the goodwill, the plan. And the money is there. Kenyans have been paying taxes since independence. But Dr. Mutunga, when your committee had summoned the Ministry of Agriculture officials about the fertilizer aspect, where he talked about the census, the e-voucher, and how there was an accountable process in ensuring that we focus on our production to feed ourselves. Your committee was presented with a sample of fake fertilizer, which was in supply. Yeah. This will in turn have an effect on our production, is it?
Yeah. The fertilizer sample that was applying to us is really not fertilizer. It was, it is this product that is produced at Kariandushi in Gilgil. Yeah. That is an unscrupulous business person who took advantage of the elaborate distributor system of the National Cereals and Produce Board, convinced the management to channel this particular product as a good product. First of all, initially he was calling it an organic fertilizer. It was not organic. There's nothing organic in it. Secondly, he called it a booster, to boost, then a conditioner. So it is moving from one type to another. And unfortunately, what we found in the committee is that there are surveillance institutions in this country. There are gatekeepers and those who ascertain the quality. They are not doing enough. Secondly, such an unscrupulous trader, business person, who has just a business idea and he convinces farmers to use this product, which is not helping them at all, should have been apprehended way before he spent 2 years selling this product to the Kenyans. So we need to be a little bit more articulate in our surveillance role and open up our eyes wider. Yeah. On the other hand, when it comes to the management of the entire subsidy program, the e-voucher system is just part of it. It's not widespread. What the government has been able to do is register 6.4 million farmers. These registered farmers, therefore, are the ones that can access the subsidy fertilizer from the NCPB distribution point. The e-voucher system is the one that fixes the farmer to the quantities, and that has not been achieved as yet. Okay. It's a program which can be outscaled and upscaled to the extent that we can now cover all the farmers and we can know precisely when we give you so much fertilizer, how much do you produce? Again, we can introduce through the e-voucher system the fertilizer, the farm insurance. or crop insurance, whereby taking a bag of fertilizer and translating that back to the farm, how much of an area do we utilize? Okay. And then how much of production are we expecting from such, depending on the variety of the crop that, or rather depending on the, on the type
What's clear is then that, Dr. Mutunga, the failure by state agencies to keep an eye on how this inflow happened, because NCPB was supplied with the fake fertilizer. Yeah. And your committee had also from the agriculture CS. Yes. But the Kenyan people, one, have lost money. Two, farmers have been affected. Yeah. Of course, they're probably not compounded by the heavy rains, which may have a net effect on our production in terms of the food output. If you are the appointing authority, what action will you take?
First of all, the culprits, those who have been involved in allowing the wrong products into the market, I would not leave them alone. I would have them apprehended and pay. Pay in the sense that they should be punished. That's the first thing. The second thing, I would make sure that the entire system is reconfigured in the sense that we can, from the point of ordering, we know exactly how much we are ordering, how is the procurement process structured in a way to land this product early enough for the farmers to receive before the rains. So I would look at the timeliness. On the other hand, I would also look at the gatekeepers and those who are regulating the industry. Because, for instance, KEPHIS takes about 500 samples of products across the country to assess whether they are viable, whether they are supposed to be used. KEBS is supposed to also be having even regional substations to pick samples and analyze. But when you follow them closely, you realize that they have not really done their work. Okay. So they need to, I would also ensure that they do their work as they're supposed to.
Okay, so you largely talked about the procedural there. Would that have included dismissing the CS?
Dismissal of the CS has to do with culpability, and which I think the mover of the motion was not able to confirm. You see, when you bring such a motion to Parliament, you must prove beyond reasonable doubt that this person has either omitted or committed. When it comes to omissions, and there is an elaborate infrastructure that is taking place, the decision of the CS is on how much fertilizer do we need in this country? Where is this fertilizer supposed to go? Is it coming in time or is not it? If it's not in time, what kind of precautionary measures do we take? Then this is transferred to an institution within the ministry to procure and ensure distribution. So decisions made along the line, the CS takes responsibility if these decisions are not punished when they are made wrongly. And that is the point at which I would come and ask the CS, what kind of actions did you take when this thing was not done correctly? But if the CS is involved in these issues like procurement and like handling of the fertilizer or making decisions on what goes where, you should be held personally responsible. Okay. And that time I would actually dismiss the CS.
Okay. Mr. Sanko, coming to you. We have lost more than 200 people because of the heavy floods, and this equals loss of labor. It equals an impact, the net effect on our food production output. With regards to the farm holder, the small farm holders, because they are much responsible for the food that we consume across the country, how much of an effect this will have on a production we have talked about hasn't achieved the needed threshold in terms of our food security? Yeah.
No, I mean, let me start by saying that as WFP and the UN, we join the Kenyans to mourn the death of the lost ones. I think for me, it's an unfortunate situation right now to have over 200 people lost their lives as a result of flood. But what I can see that this will have a huge impact in terms of productivity in this country. When you look at the amount of labor that these people bring into. But just looking back, I mean, we should not also forget that the rains can be an opportunity for us. Yes, we know it has caused huge destruction in this country. It depends on how we're able to harness it, how we're able to harvest and manage the water that we have so far to support agricultural productivity in this country. There are different ways. I mean, there are a lot of ways that are in right now that we can harness the opportunity that we have based for the rains that we have currently to support agriculture. I mean, a simple technique like, harvesting roof water can be a very good game changer in helping conserve water and storage of water in this country. That will help just for water for our own gardens in our own households. That saves a lot on domestic use. When you look at the ASAL areas, the ASAL areas provide, I mean, I think for me it's a fertile ground for all of us. The fishing industry in this country can be a game changer in this country. And I think if we also look not just in terms of agriculture, not just in terms of livestock, but also to invest in the fishing industry, I think that creates a good opportunity for our youths to actually invest in. The youths are waiting, but we need to invest in them. We need to provide that training that they require. We need to provide that startup capital for them to be able to start up. They are ready. We've been working with the youths in this country. And if I can tell you the change that you see in them, just simple things like village loan schemes that you have, a small capital of about $17 to about $100, it's a game changer. And that's again why I said the private sector needs to come in. We need to create that environment that the private sector can thrive in. Insurance in this country plays a great role in this country. How do we ensure that we work with the smallholder farmers to de-risk, sure that the banks can invest in them? And it's very, very important. These are small investments that we need to do. And as WFP and the UN, we have been working together with the government in these areas. And we've seen a great improvement, great changes in this area.
Okay, Dr. Nyoro, coming to you. Of course, different regions require different targeted interventions. And we are talking about now even food secure regions in this country facing food insecurity because of the floods. In this context, with regards to the interventions, how essential are they? And given what you have witnessed, for example, Nyandarua, which is produces, of course, potatoes at a large scale, how important is it, if you compare, for example, it and the county of Kajiado, to mitigate the disastrous impacts of climate change in different parts of the country with regards to now mapping out our food security, our food production areas across the country, given the different climatic conditions?
You know, what Dr. Songoka has said is very clear, that this has been a catastrophe. In fact, I think last night we even lost some people in Kimende.
Because of landslide.
In Kiambu, because of landslide. We all have to appreciate the fact that climate change is here with us. I think there has been a lot of more discussion about climate change than action. And go further and define what exactly does this climate change mean, before I come to your question. If you look at the last 10 years or so, we've had 3 or 4 major droughts. The first one was 2010, 2011. We came to 2016, 2017. We came to 2022, the major one, the one that affected the Greater Horn of Africa, you remember. I think within 10 years, about 4 major droughts. That devastated the entire livestock sector in our areas. In areas like Kajiado, they have wiped out livelihoods of families. And what I'm being told now is that there are places where even grass cannot regenerate because it was totally overgrazed and so on. Now, until we appreciate the fact that there is going to be, in another cycle, another very severe drought, if not end of this year, beginning of next year, and that we start putting in measures about that climate change aspect. In terms of, we have always attributed climate change to France, now to drought. Now we have seen that they are France because, it works on equal terms. So for me, and I like what Dr. Songoka is, he has emphasized this thing about the youth. And I'll tell you that our youth are very vibrant. But what our youth do is that they will not produce maize. They will not produce what you can call low value crops. Because they see agriculture as not beneficial? They actually are involved in high value crops. Okay? They are producing horticulture. If you go to Mwea, they are the young people who are producing tomatoes. They are producing dragon fruit. Okay? They are producing these apples. They are producing that kind of thing. And they have the energy. So where they see the profit, they'll go there, but they need to be facilitated. But the first thing that we need to do is, in order to deal with this climate change, I think we have to think about water harvesting, I think like Dr. Alia said here. Now this water harvesting, we have to be very careful now, because we have also seen that water harvested can be a hazard. I mean, who knew that even small dams and ponds can wash away people? Who knew that, Kidaruma could be full?
Can overflow.
And this is what I'm calling a Marshall Plan, please. I have used that term 4 times. We now have to look at our country and say, you need to start harvesting the water from the highlands, okay? Where the rivers are, you start doing dams there so that you reduce the outflow, and whatever enters into the dams, whether they are the dams that we are going to build, are the ones that are existing, can be used during the dry season for irrigation. Irrigation is actually the best insurance, against climate change. Okay. The second thing, and this is what other countries have done, including developed countries, is that climate change has meant that the seasons are shorter, okay? It has come in with new levels of pests and diseases. Like I'm saying, rains are coming when we are harvesting in Kitale. That has happened more 3 or 4 times. Now, if that happens, you have to have a crop that is harvested in October before the rains come. Now, which means the research and development must be very well advanced in terms of developing. And I like what Dr. Mutunga is saying about the varieties that you have on sugarcane. We have over 200 varieties of maize, some of them very early maturing. 90 days. I have planted a variety that has matured in 98 days. Okay? Now, that variety is available on the stock. It is available with the companies. It is available probably with Karo. Okay. But it is not available to the farmers. Why? The extension system is not working. You can tell me that there's a very good product at the shop, but if you I cannot access that product and I don't know how to use it. No point. There is no point. So you have to have R&D. Fall armyworm. We never thought that we would have fall armyworm and caterpillars as a problem. These are new pests and diseases that are coming in. And 3, which is very important, and the World Food Program, together with other organizations like USAID and John knows, FuseNet, is early warning system. Like now, we don't know what will happen in the short rains. I'm sure there is data now available showing what will happen in July, November. Early warning systems are supposed to do 3 things. 1, they prepare you. The second thing is you start preparing to respond, okay? And then you build resilience. Because if you are hit, like our farmers have been hit now, okay, what we are asking is, what is this that is going to happen for them to come back? So in terms of the question that you have asked is, we have to look at Nyandarua and high potential areas in terms of the crops that I have talked about, the enterprises that I have talked about that are climate resilient. We have to talk about sustainable agriculture, which involves all kinds of things, including zero tillage. You will see, because of lack of extension, what do you see? Because of rains all through, farmers have not done RAD preparation, okay? Yeah. Because there was no time, January, February, to do RAD preparation. So you are not supposed to do RAD preparation under sustainable agriculture. You do zero tillage. You use herbicides, and then you plant. But they don't know because there is no extension. So these regions will depend on R&D, the crops that are favorable to those areas. Yes. If you go to places like Kajiado, it's all about new fodder varieties, which has come up. Again, we have several fodder varieties that have come. You have grasses and a new type of fodder that has come in. So it's really looking at this thing and being very practical and implementing what we are talking about.
Okay, Dr. Mutunga, yes, please.
Yeah, we are looking at the effect of the rain and the effect of food security. But when you look at the kind of water that flows on our land, it's brown. What does that tell us? A lot of soil has gone. Yes. And that has destabilized the soil health. So it will take quite a bit of time to rebuild the soil health in terms of the structure of the soil itself, which has been completely messed up with, and also the texture of the soil itself. Now, those two components help in crop production. The structure helps in the root penetration, the texture, the composition of the minerals, or rather what is in the soil itself. At this point in time, we need long-term measures which will rehabilitate our soil. And that's an investment area that I do not know has been factored in the priorities of the government. If we fail to do that, we shall have soils that are barren for some time. And why is this happening? It is because we've not been deliberate again in preserving our soil. We've not been very deliberate in ensuring that we do not lose any soil. We lose so much soil every time there is too much of torrential rains. Dr. John Nyoro has talked about the early warning systems. And the question is, when has the early warning system in this country worked? When was it warning enough? A warning should help you to prepare. When did we ever get prepared out of having received the early warning? Very rarely. And
who is supposed to be issuing these?
The Met Department, the Meteorological Department is surprised as we are. So within the crisis, they are telling us, in fact, these rains will continue another week. There's possibilities are that. And when you look at the climate configuration, global, they are telling you the reason why we have a problem at the equatorial region is because of the changes in the temperatures of the sea, the oceans. And these changes are known way before. Why they do not correlate or relate these things properly to our devices, we do not know. Whether it's the capacity in the equipment or capacity in the personnel, we need to do something quickly and urgently so that we can build the necessary capacity for us to be informed.
But I mean, to give credit where it's due, they did announce the heavy rains, but the president said there isn't any.
That was in the El Nino time. That was in November. When there was El Nino, I mean, there was an announcement on El Nino, which took too long again. You see, the president has the obligation of guiding the nation in the direction we should be taking. When we realized that when we were all waiting for El Nino and took several weeks for the rains to set in, you see now the head of state has to say something. And we cannot blame the president because he's not an expert in these areas. He needed advice. But this advice doesn't seem to be working. So it's still a failure there. So we need to be very clear. Let me tell you something. I've been in some countries and watched the weather forecasts. Whatever they say does not change by minutes. There's going to be rain at 11:55. Exactly at 11:55, 56, there is rain. Again, when they tell us about rain here, they do not tell us about the nature or the behavior or the character of that particular rainfall. Some rains are too torrential. They are too destructive. They have extremely high erosivity index. They hit our clones and break them down and carry the soil away. So we need to be deliberate on preserving our soils, containing our soils on the farm. There needs to be a law on this. Okay. And you see, we have come from a background where we were saying doing terraces is a post-colonial enslavement. And I think that is very wrong. We need to revisit that issue if we have to contain ourselves on the farm. We need to be very deliberate. Why are we looking for taxes where we shouldn't? Why are we talking about turnover? Let's talk about any soil loss should be taxable.
Okay.
And it will work. People will go back to the farm and make sure that their soil is not lost because we lose it forever.
Okay. I'll come to you, Dr. Nyoro. Yes, please, Mr. Sanko.
No, I mean, just in terms of, anticipatory actions, what we call as anticipatory action is you ensure that the information reach people at the right time for them to take action. But we also have to understand that there are certain people, even if they have the information, they need a bit of a push and a bit of a help. And I think that's what we require in Kenya. When we have these disasters coming in, how do we ensure that the information, the data that we have, it's granular to ensure that the average person who sits in the village receives that information in a way that they understand it? Sometimes we pass information based on how we understand it. But we need to work together to ensure that that information, how it reaches the average man, he understands it or she understands it for him or her to take the action that is required. And if they take those actions at the right time, they actually help in protecting their food security in the country. And if you go to some of the villages, households that really received this information in a timely manner, they took steps, they have managed to save their assets. I have also seen families that managed to move their livestock to safer grounds. I have seen families, households that managed to move their harvest to a safer ground. So it's very, very important that Doctor was talking about. How do we ensure that data is actually sent out in a way that people can understand it? And when you have data, when you have information, that is gold.
Okay, before we sample the feedback here and get to see what the Kenyan people are saying, it's still on you, Mr. Sanko. Given that you are equally reaching out to other problematic areas of the world where people are food insecure, the case of Gaza, where people are starving, and also the aspect about Sudan, the crisis they are in because of the political crisis. South Sudan is another example, generally the Horn of Africa region. And now Kenya is adding up to the list because of the heavy rains, which ought to be blessing. Otherwise, if we had set the standards as required, does this stretch your capacity in terms of the rations that go to each country and to each people?
It's quite unfortunate that we're having disasters following one another, and some of them are basically human disasters, and some of them are natural. And this is really, really constraining our resource envelope in this country. I can tell you when we wanted to support the Tana River County, we literally had to take from one point to the other. I mean, what we in WFP say is that you're basically taking from the hungry to provide for the starving. And these are difficult decisions when you're doing those ones. I mean, so far, I mean, when you look at this operation, we were actually trying as much as possible to provide assistance to about 200,000 people. But what happened? We can only provide assistance to about 12,000 people. And why? It's just because we don't have the resources. And our own donors who used to actually provide for us, they are also being impacted by the same similar situations. Disasters are increasing.
Yes.
So with that, we really need to see how we can all work together with government, the counties, the private sector, to ensure that the Kenya food systems are resilient. Yes, when these shocks come in, we can bounce back. And it's very, very important. And what we mean, these are simple investments that we need to do. We really need to ensure that, how can we ensure that systems or investment that we put in place, the next flood that is coming, the next drought that is coming, they can withstand those ones. And that will really help us.
Yes, Dr. Nyoro.
Yeah, I think the first thing I wanted to do is to add to what Dr. Sokoka said, that the situation even in the organization, another relief organization, is not going to be better. They will be like Kenya because of the floods. Because what is happening at the world stage is that there is increasing amount of money that is going to the war in Israel and Gaza, the Ukraine war, the problems within Africa, the whole of West Africa. Yes. So organizations like the US government and the EU and whatever, before they get money for relief, and they have to be able to meet some of those. So increasingly, they are going to get more pressure. And I wish we can reduce the pressure on them, on things that a country can be able to do, so that they only come in when it is necessary.
All right.
What I wanted to say, two things, just to summarize. The first one is early warning systems. And the question we want to ask is, whoever develops the early warning systems, where does that information land? Who receives it? Is it the National Disaster Management Agency, NDMA, who in government receives a call on early warning systems? Because there are quite a number of organizations, including global, like Dr. Mutunga was saying. When the oceans start to warm, there is going to be El Nino, and there are a sequence of events that follow the warming of the oceans. So who gets that information, and what do you do with it? Because when you receive that information, like I said, three things are supposed to happen. The first one is to prepare. The second one is to respond.
Yes.
Okay?
Okay.
The third one is to build resilience, so that once you are hit, and you have seen hurricanes hitting the U.S.
Yeah.
Or they wait for it. They know it's coming, like Dr. Mutunga is saying, by hour. It passes. Immediately, the countries come back and they put the electricity back, they put the roads back and whatever. So that's part of it. So early warning systems, where does that information go? Who is, like droughts, there are 5 stages that they call IPC.
Yeah.
5 stages. And the first one is, they just say it is abnormal. Then they come to stress. It is stressful. It is crisis. It is an emergency. It is now catastrophe. Now, by the time you move from it is normal, it is crisis, you need to start mobilizing resources from where they are to the areas that will be affected. But I want to finish by saying that these things that we have talked about, and Dr. Mutunga has talked about institutions, departments in this country that are not taking their rightful role. We have talked about the county government. We have talked about extension. The farmers or the household knowing about these disasters, they have to be told by somebody. The bottom line is that we need to have, and this is what has happened in countries that have managed, particularly this agricultural transformation I'm talking about, a coordination unit.
Thank you.
A coordination unit that involves, and actually chaired either by the Prime Minister or by the President or by the Deputy President, that brings all those organizations together. So each one of them will be asked on their responsibility.
Okay, thank you. Let's now sample the feedback as we take the account of the Kenyan people who have been watching this broadcast. And the hashtag on X is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Here is a sample of what you're saying in relation to this story of food security and the climate change, the disruption to the food systems in the country following the heavy rains that have washed away farmland and also affected smallholder farming across the country, affecting Kenyans. First, Team Kenya says what we're experiencing should not be taken as floods. A serious country should take it as enough water and harvest for use during the droughts. The reason why it floods and droughts will still punish us is that people just talk and eat. Next is Gode Barasawere says, in a government where CS who presided over the fake fertilizer is let off the hook and experts for warning of flooding is disregarded, tells that we have to brace ourselves for more hard-hitting calamities. Our food security is shaky. Engineer Lazaro says, it's now time for early warnings and food shortage. Government shouldn't sit pretty waiting for the situation to escalate. We are sick and tired of theories, sweet dreams and seminars. Action should be in place by now. Bob Otieno Owino says, I wonder what the previous and the current governments has done or doing to Kenyans on food security during floods due to heavy rains, and not forgetting drought seasons. To us, we are warned by the diplomat that we may face it after rains. Carlo_Lepario says the impending food crisis exacerbated by recent floods demands swift action to prevent escalation. Let's prioritize resilience building and equitable distribution to avert deeper humanitarian turmoil. Odongo Rolex says was 10,000 announced by the president to compensate Kenyans who were flooded both in their households and farmlands, or it was just for evacuated Kenyans from riverbanks. Next up, MC_Ruma says after the whole fake fertilizer saga and floods, it seems that we will experience total crop failure in our country. What plans does the government have to cushion its citizens from hunger and starvation? Last-minute rush won't save the situation. Odongo Rolex again says possible we may then experience drought just after all these floods due to climate change. The government should set up a mitigation methods to counter the upcoming food security threat, which is around the corner. Brian Chemwa says food crisis requires long-term solutions that may involve better infrastructure to mitigate flood risks, diversify crops to withstand extreme weather, and improve access to insurance for farmers. Well, your final responses and briefly, starting with Dr. Mutunga.
Thank you very much. The responses tell us a lot, that we need to get ready, we need to be responsive, we need to be deliberate, and that is really important because the losses that have been incurred as a result of the floods are huge. Getting back to normal, normalcy will take quite a lot of investment, and these investments need to be focused and strategic so that we are able to get there early enough before things get out of hand. Because the indicators are very clear that there will be loss in production, there will be need for us to cushion those who will be affected, and many people have been affected.
Thank you.
And the cushion mechanisms need to be expanded in a way that it will be able to help them out.
Okay. Mr. Sanko.
Thank you again. I mean, when you look at the response, you know people are worried. And they're hungry for information. They want the information that will help them prepare. They want to make sure that they have food systems that are very resilient to these changes. So I think it's our own responsibility to work together to ensure that people receive the right information, they receive the right support. And as the United Nations, I will commit ourselves to support, to work with the government of Kenya and also the county and also to the people to ensure that their food security is kept.
Yes, Dr. Nyoro.
What you hear from outside, just like what Sanko has said, is a lot of desperation. And for the first time, you hear Kenyans using terms that we thought are technical: food security, mitigation, resilience. There's a lot of desperation out there. We are already in this pit right now. This should be taken as a warning. As I said, if it is a warning, there has to be preparedness, there has to be response, and there has to be the resilience built in. So the test is going to be, how are we going to plan to come out of the situation that we are in once the rains are gone, or even before the rains are gone? Kenyans will be watching to see, are we going to put together a plan that is convincing with resources that are necessary in order that we don't get into the kind of situation that people are talking out there. Really, the test is going to be what we are going to do right from today.
Okay, thank you. Still on the same this morning, rescue mission is again underway in an attempt to locate and recover 4 persons who have gone missing from the Madaida village, Lari. And this is in relation that it's believed that a landslide that occurred on Tuesday night buried the 4 people alive. The mission is being led by the Kenya Red Cross team, the county government of Kiambu Disaster Management Unit, and is expected to be bolstered by the expertise from the Kenya Army, who are part of the mission at the moment. And this is part of the rescue efforts underway in the Kimende landslide. The search and rescue mission of the 4 persons who are buried alive continues with the Kenya Red Cross team leading and in coordination with the Kiambu County Government and the Kenya Army.
Wanaume na si kuwajua majina kabisa ni nani na nani, lakini nilikuwa ninajua kijiji yao. Sasa nikakuja nikasikia mtetemeko ya ardhi, nikakuja nikashughulia, nikaona sikuona mtu hata moja, lakini nilisikia duru. Sasa wakati niliona hakuna mtu mwingine, mimi nikuteremka, nilimteremka.
From the village, there are 3 people are missing from the village, and the same people that we are suspecting, maybe they could be buried, but we hope for the best.
Ilikuwa inatolewa na, yani inafunguliwa na tingatinga, lakini ikafikia wakati mwingine hiyo maporomoko ikazidi tingatinga na tingatinga ikaondoka. Sasa ikafika wakati ya masaa ya jioni, ndio hiyo sasa hii poromoko kubwa ndio iliteremka na ikafuga njia yote.
And with that, we come to a close here on the broadcast. Many thanks, gentlemen, for your time. Dr. John Mutunga is the chairperson of the National Assembly's Agriculture Committee, as well as the lawmaker representing Tigania West. Thank you for your time. Bai Mankai Sanko is the Deputy Country Director, the United Nations World Food Programme Kenya. Thank you for your time. Dr. James Nyoro is food security expert and the former governor of the county of Kiambu. And thanks to you too for waking up with us here on the broadcast. And to just get this answer from my director, is it over Stafford? Well, he hasn't given up. Waits for the last day of the English Premier League following the City win at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. But the hopes from their neighbours in North London, Arsenal, I included, never came to fruition. We'll talk about this some other day. I'm sure Sam Gituku will be happy wherever he is. We'll see you next week here on the broadcast. Thanks for watching. Up next is Safin with the Health and Lifestyle segment. Good morning.